This show is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. The content on this show is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such condition.
This is Rooted in Healing with Dr. Beth Claxton, exploring the science of functional medicine and the power of healing from within. Breathe in, breathe out. And now your host, Dr. Beth Claxton.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Rooted in Healing. I'm your host, Dr. Beth Claxton. Today we have a guest that I find absolutely fascinating. Matt Dawson is the CEO of a company called True Diagnostic. He's an epigenetic practitioner. He's a medical doctor who you will learn left his practice because he saw that he could make a difference in helping people from a genetic standpoint modify their genes and change the outcome of their lives. He found that that was far more impactful than working in a clinical practice with people where people were coming in already having expression of diseases and imbalances. And I wanted to give you a little background in the field of epigenetics and the whole how it came about that we're doing this kind of testing. The field of epigenetics actually was started in 1942. That term was coined by a man named Conrad Waddington in Britain. And he was describing genes interacting with the environment. Now we're going to fast forward to 2003 when the Human Genome Project was completed. This is when the genomic sequence of Homo sapiens, human beings, was completed, and we knew all the genes that a human body has. There were a lot of things that came out of this. We definitely had our sequencing, which was fascinating. We learned that it wasn't that much off from a housefly. We also learned about the doors were opened really to start learning about the microbiome, and the field of epigenetics actually exploded because we could really start to see what turned on and off these genes. Then what happened in around 2007, just to help us, the things that we knew, what were happening in the time. 2007, 23andMe started marketing to the public. Hey, let's take a look at your genes and we can help you with your ancestry. We can find out where you came from. There were people that started finding siblings and cousins and even potentially parents that they didn't know that they had. And then in 2014, Ancestry.com came along and they started doing the same type of ancestry DNA. Then both of these companies developed a health analysis, and there were many, many, many other companies that started to develop. What has happened now that when we're talking to Matt Dawson is the field of epigenetics has become so fine-tuned and so accurate that we can now look at someone's genome and look at how the epigenetics are working on it, and we can predict diseases that are inevitable to happen. Like there is an epigenetic profile, like a stamp, an impression that means when all those genes are turned on or off, that means that someone has colon cancer. And this is what the study called Cologuard is, which is the study that people do so they don't have to do a colonoscopy. It's the alternative to a colonoscopy, and it's performed every 3 years. So that's the Cologuard. There are multiple other cancers that can be detected this way, and fascinating information. The thing that we need to realize with all of this great information and the advances in science and learning how genes are turned on and off, what our genes say, what genes we're manifesting, what we have in our genomic sequence on our personal blueprint, that's all great. And knowing how to change them is fantastic. But what we need to do is ask ourselves, are we ready to take that information and do the work that it's going to take to change our epigenetic expression? And this is a big shift in the practice of medicine. This is a huge shift from knowing that something is wrong with us, going to a doctor, getting a pill, and going home and thinking the pill's going to take care of it. This is actually going back to our genetic makeup, taking responsibility for the lifestyle that we have, and saying that is what, recognizing that is what is turning on and off the genes, and what can I do to change that? So it's a big shift in medicine, yes, that we can get all these answers. It's a big shift for all of us as patients to take responsibility for this information and how we can change it in ourselves. So think about that for a few minutes while we go to this commercial break, and we will be right back with this fascinating interview with Dr. Matt Dawson of True Diagnostic.
And now, more Rooted in Healing with Dr. Beth Claxton.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Dr. Beth Claxton. Today we have Dr. Matthew Dawson with us, and he's a physician who leverages genomics and epigenetics to revolutionize health and longevity. He founded Wild Health, a precision medicine practice using AI-driven genomics, which scaled nationwide to all 50 states. Currently, he is CEO of True Diagnostic, a leading epigenetic lab focused on biological age testing and AI-driven epigenetics to diagnose chronic diseases. And he's an award-winning educator, has published several dozen scientific articles, authored 2 textbooks, who has spoken in over 20 countries, and Dr. Dawson lives in the woods with his wife, 4 children, and 2 dogs. Welcome, Dr. Dawson.
Thank you, Dr. Claxton. It's great to be here with you.
So these are some really big words in your bio, and I'd love to start off with, let's start off with your background and your story and what got you into this space, and then let's get into the definitions behind genomics and epigenetics and exactly what they mean so that people can really understand the depth of what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. So my background is a physician, as you mentioned. I was practicing kind of standard medicine at a university. I was an associate professor teaching med students and residents and seeing patients and really enjoying that life in that world. But I noticed that people just weren't getting better. It seemed like the patients we were seeing were the same thing over and over. And it reminded me of a parable of a village on the river. And one day they heard someone screaming in the river. They went and they pulled the person out. The next day, the same thing happened. They went and pulled the person out. And this kept happening until finally they said, you know what, maybe we should go upstream and see who's throwing people in the river. And that's what it felt like to me. It felt like I was just getting these people drowning and pulling them out of the river, but there was more, if we could kind of go upstream and do more to prevent a lot of these things. And as I was having that kind of epiphany and a little bit of a disillusionment with standard medicine, I started seeing a lot of evidence coming out around precision medicine. So looking like that we could actually tailor people's treatments and what they eat and how they exercise and all those things to their genetics and their epigenetics. And the interesting thing about medicine is it's usually about 15 to 20 years behind the science. And so no one was really practicing this way. And I just saw more and more of the science emerging. And I wanted to practice this way. I wanted to try this. And I had around the same time, also had a difficult issue with my grandmother who was diagnosed with dementia, with Alzheimer's. No one in the hospital, her doctors, there's not much they could do for her. And after she passed away, I was very frustrated, and I was thinking about my mother and knowing that this was somewhat of a genetic thing. And I had her tested, and sure enough, she had this gene that made her 200 to 300% more likely to get Alzheimer's disease. And so I decided to try out all these things that I was reading to see if I could gather enough data on her. I kind of developed this hypothesis that with enough data, we really could predict or prevent a lot of these chronic diseases. So we ran genetics on her, epigenetics, a ton of other blood work, collected all this data, started treating her, and in 3 months she lost 40 pounds and reversed her insulin resistance and told me she felt 20 years younger. And then we did it with a friend of mine, his mother as well, who had also been reading the science. She lost 80 pounds, got off all her medicines for chronic diseases. And so we both left our universities and started a precision medicine practice. And that's how we initially got into genetics and epigenetics, taking a much deeper dive into who we are at the DNA and genetic level, and then making treatment recommendations and optimizing people according to that.
That's a great story. So what's the difference between genetics and epigenetics?
Yeah, great question. So I think most people understand genetics, like we're born with a specific genetic code in our DNA, and that doesn't change. Now, you may have heard the saying, DNA is destiny. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not. Your genetics account for about 20% of your health outcome, but the other 80% are related to what you eat, how you sleep, how you exercise, your stress levels, and that is epigenetics. It's how you turn those genes on and off. It's how you express those genes. That accounts for the other 80%. So if you're able to measure epigenetics also, how you're expressing your genes, from that you can predict a lot. You can gather an incredible amount of information. So genetics is, it's what we're born with, and epigenetics is how we express those genes, and that makes up about 80% of the health outcome.
Yeah, and there's a lot, I'm learning a lot that we can do to determine how our genes are expressed, and it's not rocket science.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
It's getting enough sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are in control. It's a really empowering thing when you realize that we are not our genes. We are the product of the decisions we make around those genes. They have an influence, but we have so much control over it.
Right. So now what you're doing with True Diagnostic is something called biologic age. So can you tell us about what exactly is biological age?
For sure. And just to clarify, it is a small part of what we do with epigenetics. So to kind of continue the story, after we left our universities and started Wild Health, that was a precision medicine company. It was mainly focused on genetics, that component of it. I grew that company. It ended up being acquired by a public company. I stayed on as CEO. And as I was running that company, I was approached by some folks at True Diagnostic who wanted me to take a look at some research they were doing with Harvard. And when they told me what they were doing, at first, I kind of dismissed it because I was like, that's too good to be true. That's not possible. But then I dug in, I talked to the professors doing the studies, and after about a week, I became convinced it was the most exciting thing I'd ever seen in science and medicine. And what they were doing exactly, and I'll get to the biological age question specifically, but they were looking at this genetic expression. And there are some tests and groups out there that your listeners may recognize, like Cologuard. Cologuard is a test for colon cancer, and it looks at genetic expression, epigenetics, to diagnose colon cancer. There's another company called Grail that tests for about 50 different cancers with just a few drops of blood. And the way that those tests work is, if you get pancreatic cancer or breast cancer or colon cancer, you start expressing your genes very differently. And we can find that epigenetic fingerprint of what does it look like to have those different cancers. So this Harvard study, they were looking at, well, can we find other chronic diseases as well, the epigenetic fingerprint from just a few drops of blood? And the results were remarkable. They absolutely could. And so that's what initially got me so excited about True Diagnostic and why I came over and started running True Diagnostic. Now, what True Diagnostic was testing at the time was not these chronic disease diagnostics yet. It was biological age. So when you were able to look at a million different gene sites, which is what we look at about 1 million specific genes and how you're expressing each of those, you can tell a lot of information about disease, but you can also tell about someone's biological age. So what does that mean? That was your question. So we all know what our chronological age is. That's our birthday. If you don't know your chronological age, look at your driver's license and you can figure it out pretty easy. The biologic age is very different. We all know people who are 60, but they look and perform like a 40-year-old, or 60 and look and perform like an 80-year-old. And what determines that is how they've expressed their genes, all the decisions they've made. And we can measure that by looking at epigenetics and see, what is this person most like? This 60-year-old, are they performing, and is their health more like a 40-year-old or an 80-year-old? And so that biological age is the real determinant of our health and how long we're going to live. The number one risk factor for every chronic disease is age. And if we can get a more accurate measure of what that biological age is, then that tells us about our risks for every disease. So it's a really nice kind of global marker for how healthy are you and how well are you doing, that biological age.
Wow. So what else can we tell from looking at epigenetics besides like how old our genes are? Yeah.
So to drill into the biological age really quickly, the test that we sell is called True Age at True Diagnostic. And it's actually 3 different biological age clocks that are used in 3 different ways. So one is called the Omic M-Age. That was developed by Harvard. We developed that in conjunction with them. And it is a really good predictor for your biologic age and kind of how much longer you have to live, to be blunt about it. Another one that we use is called Symphony Age. So this was developed by Yale. And instead of just one number for what is your biological age, it measures your different organ systems ages, because we age in a heterogeneous way. So our brain may age faster than our kidneys, or our liver may age faster if we drink a lot of alcohol, or our heart may age faster if we don't exercise. So Symphony Age, we report on this also, your organ systems age, to kind of find your weakest link so you know what to do something about. And the third biologic age test we use is actually a pace of aging. So this was developed by Duke. It's called the Dunedin Pace. And this is my favorite one, because what it does is it's got like a speedometer for your age. It tells you how fast you're aging right now. Because if let's say you're 40 years old, and I get your biological age back, and it says it's 44 or 36. Well, I don't really know if you're older or younger because of decisions you made in your 20s or things that are happening now. Whereas the PACE test tells me how you're doing right now. And it gives me a number like from 0.6 to 1.4. So if it's 0.8, that means you're aging 20% slower than normal. That's great. If it's 1.2, you're aging 20% faster than normal. And what I can do with that is a lot of things as a clinician. So that test has been shown to be very responsive to intervention. So, for example, if you get pregnant, that's a biological stress, and you age about 20% faster while you're pregnant. But once you deliver the baby, your rate of aging comes back down to normal. The same thing if you get COVID or get a car accident or have hip surgery, your rate of aging goes up, but then when you recover, it comes back down. So what this allows an individual to do, or a physician to do, is to try things with the patient. So if you're a patient and you get your pace of aging and you want to change your diet, for example. So Stanford did a study using this pace test where they crossed people over and had them eat a vegan diet for a while and an omnivore diet for 8 weeks each. And they measured their pace in each case. And just in 8 weeks of changing their diet, they could see people's pace of aging change. So you could kind of dial in what is the perfect diet for me by doing experiments with different diets and measuring this pace test. Or you could try a specific supplement or a new hot intervention or things to reduce your biologic age. I have patients frequently that ask me things like, hey, should I go to Panama and get stem cell injections, which may cost $40,000? Well, if they're going to make that investment in a big therapeutic, they probably should have a measure of, is it working? And the pace is a really nice global measure of how do certain things affect your pace of aging. So those are the biological age tests that we run. Now, you asked, what else can epigenetics measure? So this is a fascinating question, because in that Harvard study that I mentioned that I got so excited about, they asked another question in that study. They had seen some literature from a researcher named Richard Marioni several years ago, who he found with epigenetics, you could also measure people's other biomarkers. So, for example, a CRP, which is a measure of inflammation, or a hemoglobin A1C, that's a measure of your metabolic health. He found that he could predict those just by looking at epigenetics. So instead of getting a draw from a LabCorp or Quest, he could predict those with epigenetics. So in this Harvard study, they said, well, can we find more of these biomarkers that we can predict with epigenetics? And they found about 1,000 that they could predict. And when they looked at those biomarkers and how they compared to the traditional biomarkers, they actually were more predictive of disease. So you can measure biologic age. You could also diagnose cancers and chronic disease, like we've talked about, and you can measure all these other biomarkers. So when I first started Wild Health, it was great to get these great results, but what bothered me at the time was it was so expensive. Like, to do what we did for my mother and collect all this data cost so much money. And my hypothesis was if we had enough data, we could predict things and help people. But it was expensive. So epigenetics kind of solved that. With this Harvard study, we found that with a few drops of blood and a few $100s, we could get up to tens of thousands of dollars of information. So you can, what I've come to believe, Dr. Claxton, is what you can predict with epigenetics is only limited by your imagination and the size of the data set. We're finding more and more things that we can predict with epigenetics now.
It's so amazing. So I'm listening to all the data, all of the information that you can get from this test, and I'm thinking, how many tubes of blood do you have to give up to get this information? And you're saying it's a few drops. So what does the test look like? Does it come to your home?
Yeah, so this is a common complaint back when I was running Wild Health. We'd send a patient, we'd collect all this data, and LabCorp would draw 24 tubes of blood when we first started, and people were like, you're bleeding me out, what's going on? And so that is the beautiful thing. So what happens is a kit actually comes to your house. It's a little finger stick. You prick your finger, and then you squeeze out a few drops of blood onto what's called a dried blood spot card. So it's a little piece of paper. It absorbs a few drops of blood. You send it back, and that's all we need, because we just need a tiny amount of your DNA, and then we look at that DNA and look at how it's being expressed at about 1 million different sites. So it's literally a few drops of blood, and that's the company Grail. They kind of got their name because when they first saw that we could predict all these cancers with a few drops of blood, they're like, wow, this is the holy grail of testing. So it is quite remarkable that with such a small sample you can tell so much.
It's absolutely fascinating, and it's a little scary. Do you ever have people say that it's a little scary to have all this information about how old I really am and when I could die? And how do you answer that?
Yeah. When I hear someone say that, I understand. Anything new and different can seem that way, but I think about it differently. I think information is power. And I mean, even when my mother, when I told you we tested her genetics and got her results back and saw that she was at risk, had about a 200 to 300% increased risk of getting dementia, what I said to her is, I said, Mom, this is good news, because now we know, and we know what to do about this, and we're going to do something about it, and we're going to prevent this. So to me, I mean, you can't, what gets measured gets managed, and you can't make a change and do something about it if you don't know. So I would much prefer not to bury my head in the sand and not know. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what to do about it. So with our test, sure, you get the biologic age and the pace of aging, but we're not saying this is set. You're older than you should be or you're aging faster. We have another test called True Health, and that's the one that measured all the biomarkers. So I mentioned with epigenetics, we can also tell things like your CRP and inflammation level, or your hemoglobin A1C and metabolic health, or your triglycerides and those things. So True Health gives you that granular data. So then you kind of know why you're aging faster or slower, and you can do something about it. You can see, oh, my inflammatory marker's up, so now I can eat an anti-inflammatory diet, or I can figure out the things that are causing that. So I think information is power, and my goal is always to give people as much information about their health as we possibly can.
Right. So can you talk more about what we can do to reverse that biological age?
Mm-hmm, for sure. So first I'll say there's a lot. Now, most of the things are the things that we already know, though. It's the things like eating a healthy diet, getting plenty of sleep, exercising. Now that advice is generic, and I don't love it. The nice thing about getting this type of information is you can actually dial that in. So just like I mentioned, if you want to try different diets out, so let's say you get your true age and your true health back, and you got to pace your pace of aging. You could look at the true health and look at kind of, okay, what markers are off, like which vitamins or minerals are on the low ends. You could adjust your diet to kind of fix that. Or you could also just wholesale change your diet and see how that affects your pace of aging to dial in what is the perfect diet for you. So I'll tell you a quick story about my chief of staff. She's young. She's 28. She's for the last about year and a half to 2 years, every quarter she'll look at her pace of aging, and she also will do her True Health. And based on the True Health results, she'll modify what vitamins she's taking, how she's living her life, what she's eating, and just try to optimize those markers. And she keeps doing that test every quarter. And she's taking her pace of aging all the way down to 0.6. So that means at this point, she's optimized enough to where she's aging 6 years for every 10 years. So over the next 50 years, she'll only age 30 years. So that's how she's used this. Now, I'll also tell you that some of the things that people don't think about as much make some of the biggest impacts in pace of aging and biological age. Sleep is vastly underrated, probably the most underrated. But people are talking about that now, which is great in the last few years. The other one, though, that I don't think people are talking about enough is stress and its effect on us. The number one thing I would say anytime anyone talks to me about what can reverse biologic age and slow down, I remind them of the biggest and best study on this that's ever been done. It's the Harvard study on healthy aging. It's been about 80 years now, over 1,000 people, and they look at what things affect how long someone is going to live. And they also measured happiness, which I loved in this study. I think every study should measure happiness as well, the quality of your life, not just the quantity of it. And they found the things that you would expect: diet, exercise, smoking. Obviously, if you don't smoke versus smoking, that changes your life by about 10 years, a decade. But they found one thing that was the biggest, even bigger than smoking or not smoking, and it was the strength of your social relationships. So your relationships and your connection to others. And I just try to stress that as much as I can in many places I can. We don't think about that with our health as much, but it's a much bigger impact than diet, exercise, any sort of supplement or medication or anything else. The strength of your social relationships is the biggest thing that's going to affect how long you live and how happy you are while you're living.
That's so beautiful. When you look at the blue zones, the places in the world where people live to be routinely 100 or more, they're very tight-knit communities.
Yeah, 100%. It's fascinating. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Anyone who's not looked into that or read that book, they tried so hard to find what is similar, and they thought, okay, is it the diet? Is it the exercise? What is it about these places? And that is the one thing, you're totally right, that they found across all of these is the connection and the relationships. And you have places like in Italy, where one of the blues is, they drink wine, and we know alcohol is a toxin and not great for us. and like, how do these people live so long and do this? And it's because of the connection. In all these places, they had good factors and bad factors going for them from the traditional thing, but they all had the same thing, which is connection to each other and these relationships.
Mm-hmm. So beautiful. So I'd like to know how your mom is doing now.
Oh, she's wonderful. She's she was the greatest mom ever. Now she's the greatest grandmother ever. I have 4 kids between 7 and 16, and she teaches as well. She teaches third graders, and yeah, she's doing incredible. She's extremely healthy and sharp, and I do not believe she's going to get Alzheimer's, or if she does, I think we've delayed it by 10 to 20 years, which is also a big win to think about my kids having an extra decade or more with her and how much she loves them and they love her. She's doing wonderful.
Excellent.
Thank you for asking.
Oh, you're welcome. And in your bio, you talk about living in the woods. And
yeah.
Did any of this research help you make that decision?
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention was nature and access to nature. There's a lot of studies on this. And the interesting thing about when we look at kind of epidemiological studies, and you'll understand this, Dr. Claxton, but when we're looking at does something actually make a difference for something, one of the things we look at is also dose response. And nature is really interesting in that more exposure to nature definitely helps your health, but even the quantity of it and the depth of it. So they've done studies of people in hospitals after a gallbladder surgery, and if they have a view of a window outside of nature, they heal faster. So just seeing nature. And then they've looked at, okay, if you live close to a park, you do better, you live longer. And if you go into the woods and do what's called forest bathing, like the Japanese do, that adds even more. So for me, living in the woods and being in nature was important for me and my family. When I talk about connection as the number one thing I think is most important for health, I think about connection to others, like we just talked about, but I also think connection to our food, connection to our bodies and how we move and exercise, and connection to nature as well. So I try to kind of stack those. Just to give you an example, sometimes with my company, I'll have people out to my house in the morning and start there, and we'll start with a ruck through the woods. So a ruck is kind of a hike, but you can kind of carry weight. So people that are more fit can carry more weight. Those that aren't can carry none. And we're connecting to our bodies. We're connecting to nature. We're connecting to each other. Sometimes we even forage and actually find some wild foods and eat it later, and some of the connection to food. So I think being close to nature, and I completely understand that it's a privilege. Not everyone has access to that. But if you do, in whatever quantity you do, I think it's a really important thing for our health.
Yeah, I have a story also. This past spring, I was asked to go on a Grand Canyon hiking trip, really like just a few days before they left. And I had never really gone on a serious backpacking trip. So I threw some things in a very old backpack that weighs like 4 times as much as the new ones. But, and these were 3 friends that I was very close with like 20 years ago. We all had children at the same time. And, you know, when you have a lot of children, you just don't get out with your friends so much. So we did this hike down into the canyon, the Grand Canyon, and slept on the ground in the dirt. And I have my Garmin watch, and I noticed that my sleep score was 100. It was fantastic. And my heart rate variability doubled.
Absolutely.
After that one hike with my friends down into the canyon.
I was totally going to say that. I thought that's where you were going. It's amazing. Every summer we take a trip somewhere where we'd have no reception, either a river rafting trip or something with the kids. And I'm just fascinated that even though you have no air conditioning, you're sleeping on the ground, all these things, your heart rate variability, which is a measure of stress, everyone who measures that on these trips, it goes up. I've noticed in my house if I sleep with the windows open, it actually is higher, which is fascinating. And so I have a trip with some very close friends where we're going to try to get a Guinness Book of World speed record for Kilimanjaro as a group here in a couple of months. But even though we're going to be kind of working hard and it'll be a strenuous thing, like I expect that I'll probably have a better HRE than I do with my office job and working like we normally do. So it's really cool to see that immediate impact if you do measure those biomarkers.
It's fun to watch. It's a lot of information to carry on your wrist, and it can be really fun and very good feedback, I think. So tell me, Matt, what are you most excited about in the future?
Yeah, what I'm most excited about. I mentioned my hypothesis that with enough information and data, it's interesting in medicine. We have so many great treatments for things, but when you're able to diagnose and predict things, it makes such a difference. With cancer, I use breast cancer as an example. If you're diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer, stage 1, and you catch it early, you have an 80% survival rate. If you're diagnosed at stage 4, you have a 20% survival rate. So it's just about catching it earlier. And that's it with any disease. And so with epigenetics and all of this data, we're able to kind of see in the future and then do something about it. I was giving a talk recently at a conference, and kind of a guy who is responsible for some cancer technology that won a Nobel Prize. He was there, and he made a comment of, if we can find it, like we can do something about it. We have so many treatments. So as we're able to get all of this data with epigenetics, I'm really excited about the opportunity to use artificial intelligence with it. One of the problems you just kind of alluded to with there's a lot of information, like what you just get even from your wrist, it gets to a point where the data can be overwhelming. And what do I do if I can get hundreds or 1,000 biomarkers with a few drops of blood and all this information? What do I do with it? Our human brains aren't really meant to be able to take all that information in and make great decisions. So the combination of these two things, epigenetics, which gives you all this data, and the rise of artificial intelligence, which can synthesize all of that, I think we're heading into an area where we're just going to be able to see around the corner as to what's coming, and we're going to know exactly what to do about it with all of this data. So that combination of artificial intelligence and epigenetics, I think, is going to really revolutionize medicine. And I hope that we also figure out a way to not lose connection while we're doing it as well. I hope that we're able to spend those extra years as good years and connected to each other. But that combination of AI and epigenetics, I'm very excited about.
And what I'm seeing is maybe with the simplicity of it all, that we can be more connected because we're not weighted down by complexity.
That's right. Yeah, that's the hope, is that all of this technology is able to simplify it for us and help us make better decisions so we can do those things that matter more.
So if someone is ready to jump in and do this test, how do they do it?
Sure. So at truediagnostic.com, and it's spelled TRUD, so there's no E on true. So TRUD, truediagnostic.com. That's where both the True Age test, which gives those 3 different biological age measures, and the True Health test that gives all the biomarkers. So that's where those are sewed. In the near future, we'll also be rolling out a lot of the diagnostics and predictors as we continue to develop those with Harvard and Yale and our other collaborators. But truediagnostic.com is where all of those tests are.
And what does one of these tests cost?
Sure. So the True Health and the True Age test are each $4.99. But there's also a combination test where you get both, and it is, I believe, it's around $800 for the combination of the two. And it's a lot of data. It is, like I said, if you were to get all the biomarkers that you get in the True Health test alone, you kind of get all those from the LabCorp Quest, it would be over $10,000. So it's a lot of data that you get. But those are the prices. Frequently, there will be sales. I think there's like a New Year sale going on right now too, so it may be 15 or 20% off or something like that as well. But the prices I gave you were the highest prices that they are. That's the highest it ever is. But frequently you can find it a little less expensive as well.
Okay, another question. So say someone does this testing and then they have questions. Are there consultations?
So we've designed it. So most of the tests that we sell are through healthcare providers, about 80%. So physicians will get this and use it with their patients, and then they're kind of consulting them. only about 20% are just people coming and wanting to test themselves. I think we have folks who you can reach out to for more information about it. If it's confusing, we tried to develop the product in a way where it's pretty self-explanatory, though, with a lot of kind of guidance and recommendations based on it. So if you have if whatever your biomarkers, if they're higher or lower, there's a recommendation with it as to what that means and what to do about it. So your physician certainly could give you more guidance, but we tried to design it so that you could kind of guide yourself. We realize not everyone has access to clinicians as well, so we tried to design it to where it could be useful for you, even if you don't have someone. And the way that I use it is similar to how I mentioned with my chief of staff, quarterly or twice a year or once a year, because you'll want to do the test, but then when you make changes, you want to make sure that you're getting the results that you want, the things are going in the correct direction.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's great. I think we have a lot of resources and education about this at truediagnostic.com. So that's a good place if people want to learn more. And I just always, no matter how many times we talk about it, when I have the chance, I just always try to remind people it's about the strength of your social relationships. People always want to ask me what supplement, what hot new medication is going to reverse aging, and I just tell them, like, look, you're wasting your time with those things if you're not focusing on your relationships. So I can never stress that enough.
I love that message, and a good place to sign off. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
And we'll go to commercial break.
And now, more Rooted in Healing with Dr. Beth Claxton.
Hi, and welcome back. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. I'm your host, Dr. Beth Claxton. I loved that interview with Dr. Dawson. And his company, True Diagnostic, has been very, very generous with us today. They are offering a discount code for 20% off their testing. This testing that he says is worth $10,000 of lab tests done at LabCorp or SonoraQuest, we can do for $800 through his company, and with a 20% code, that's $720. That's not much money to have so much information. And again, what are you going to do with this information? Are you willing to do the work? So that code, I know you're all waiting for it, is Dr. Claxton 20, all capital DRCLAXTON 20. It's live and ready to go through True Diagnostic, spelled TRU, Diagnostic, DIAGNOSTIC.com. And you can order their tests there. There are two different tests for $399, I believe, and then one test that's $800. You can get 20% off of any of those tests until June 1st, 2026. If you have any questions, if you want to explore this more, if you want to know how to change your lifestyle to influence your genes, come see me. I love this. I am diving into this epigenetic realm, and I consider myself a lifelong learner. I'm always learning. This is my new passion for 2026, and I am having so much fun with people in my practice right now. You get in touch with me by going to bethclaxtonmd.com, BETHCLAXTONMD.com, and you can schedule a free connection call for 15 minutes if you want a little more time, a $50 connection call. It's all there, easy to schedule. And know that you can tune in to Rooted in Healing every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. We'll bring you as much wide variety of content as we can. Let us know if there are topics that you'd like to hear about. We are on KAZM 106.5 FM, 780 AM, Mellow Mountain Radio. And until then, until next time, keep finding what makes you feel happy and vibrant and healthy and radiant, because this indeed is the true root of health. Thank you.